Vietnam. Good afternoon for this last session of this short course on methodology. We are now on nearly by the end of January 2022, and you had nearly all your courses, and central part of your activity will be this phases, CP, as we call it very often, and about 22 students sent me a first proposal with a topic, and for some of you with 2 or 3 pages, table of content or references. So we are, at this beginning of the final steps of the program. And we have to be very clear on the choice of the topic. We have to be very clear on the methodology again, what to do, what are the good practice, what are also the warnings. And this is what I want to underline this one. I will use slides you already received, but I will use it with the comments I can give you after reading carefully the 22 proposals I already received. The first thing I can say here, using this presentation here, you find on the screen, starting with topics, quality, and question marks, is that if I divide the proposals I received, it is as it was on these slides. The portfolio is made of very different proposals. The first category could be saying classical proposals. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples each time. In the classical proposals, we find IPOs, for example. I have a topic on IPOs, a topic on volatility, and a topic on retail banks and customer satisfaction. They are very close, in fact, if you compare to what you see on the screen, to number 2, controlling banks and insurance companies, or number 3, credit management in banks, which are very classical topics right now. To be classical for a topic doesn't mean it's a good or it's a bad topic. It means when you go on a classical topic, you have to be very careful to the references and literature. It means a large number of articles were already written, published in academic, in professional journals. Chapter of books, are available. Very often, if you have a look to one of the basic textbooks in corporate finance or in banking, you find already a literature review. Okay, so that means you need to find another dimension of these topics, which is dimension with possibility to obtain what we call a contribution. It means something which is, it can be a case, it can be an application, it can be several cases, it can be interviews, it can be a comparison between different IPOs or different volatilities, version of the market, stock markets, even in Vietnam, and between different periods of times. And it can be different policy, in that case, of customer satisfaction between different retail banks networks. So on classical topics, it was the case here for the number 2 or number 3, for example. You really need to find to present a kind of exhaustive literature review, and also to identify an original, new research question or research questions in order to bring some kind of contribution. So this is the first element. If I have a look to your different topic. The second one, you have to be very careful if you start with topics, dealing with an economic sector. Generally, it is too large. It means you have an example, it becomes very descriptive. It's more a topic for a paper you write in an MBA program than in a master in finance and banking. Among the topics, you can find here, you find, for example, the number 7 on that screen, impact of health, household expenses, and economic growth, which is quite large, usually done at the level of the economy. And it's also very difficult, to deal with that topic because you need many data, because, of course, economists in different research institutes or for government or even in the banking system are working on that, and they will do better than what you can do in a few months. So be very careful to that kind of topic. I have several examples here with you today. There is one topic on frozen food sector. It's why not? But it's a business, it's more a business strategy topic than anything else. So it is something I don't recommend, to take, or I recommend to move to some more financial question in the frozen food industry. Perhaps question on investment, perhaps a question on working capital management, perhaps a question on the returns and comparison between different firms, comparison with international firms also. We have the same questions and problem with dairy products. And for dairy products, one of the questions also, it is at the same time, kind of too global topic. But also on the case which is used in that presentation, several papers have already been written, which means the contribution you can bring is very limited, and probably you cannot do better or even bring something new if you compare to the preceding papers. So why not dairy products? But you have to find another way to deal with that topic. Be very careful not to be too descriptive. Be very careful to bring something new. Be very careful not to present a kind of summary of all the papers already written on that questions. Among this category of warnings, I would say, frozen food, dairy products, I will add a presentation I read yesterday on the trends, in international trade. So be also very careful, because you will not find the right data. It's very difficult to catch. Only international institutions like the World Bank or of course, central institution, financial institution, or commercial institution in Vietnam get this data. And when you get the data, you have so many data that it's difficult at the level of the software or you get as students to deal with that topic. So I identify here two categories: classical topic, and you have to be careful, but you can find a way with an example, with a case, if you deal with that topic, IPO, volatility, and they are very different topics. Volatility is a quantitative topic. IPO, it's more classical corporate finance or market topic. Same for retail bank, and customer satisfaction on one hand, and three topics, which are quite risky, I would say, because they are too large, too descriptive, and you you cannot compete with research institutes or papers written by consultants, international institutions, central banks, frozen food, dairy products, and international trade. Now, you can have, and this is probably what you can do, more specific topic, I would say, is a large category of topic there, and among these topics, if you see my slide here, you have topics which are very specific and difficult. And I recommended to the students who made the proposal at the time to move to another topic. It's number 4 here on dividend policies in airlines. Or be very careful also to topics like number 5 here, which is an original topic, but it's probably too up to date. You are not working for an article published tomorrow morning in economic journal in Vietnam. You are working on a thesis, so you need data. You need to deal with something which is over, a topic which is finished. Okay, the end of a story. So that's also very, very dangerous. And in these category here, we can make a distinction between something you like, it seems, which is on M&A. I've got several topics on M&A, and very, I would say, original topics, and I hope that you get the data necessary to do that, but I'm quite interested by these topics. M&A is, of course, applied to a specific operation or to specific operations or to a specific measure, or also to an economic sector or subsector. And I identify 3 proposals here. The first one, which is quite interesting for interest, and I think we didn't have any paper on that here at CVG before. It is M&A in education. What about M&A education? What does it mean? Is there room for that? What is the value of a school, of a university? Also, this is quite interesting. How to make calculations, what kind of methods to use. There's good, interesting questions. We have papers at the international levels on that question. So probably there's something original to write here. The second one, it's another economic sector which is growing very quickly right now, which is e-commerce. And there's an M&A proposal on e-commerce operations. And this is also of interest because the value is very difficult to calculate, as we mentioned earlier, on economic sectors like the pharmaceutical sector, for example, which is a very different sector, but find the same problem. So this is an original, and if you get data, this is a very good topic. There is a third one on M&A, which is more on measures, but we need also topics on measures, which is a topic on synergies. How to measure synergies and to integrate synergies into the value process and the negotiation into an M&A operation. So we have 3 good M&A topics with original applications, and I'm very happy to discover these three proposals. Then one of the characteristics on these 22 proposals is that, we find modern, I would say, or new other dimension. You see on the slide number 2, I already showed you several, up-to-date potential topic or topics already proposed by students from the last 2 intake. Topics on infrastructure, for example, with PPP and BOT questions, the crowdfunding platforms, which is something which is spread now all over the world, and particularly in the US and in China. The relation, conflicts, association, joint ventures, operations, financial operations between fintechs and banks. And I would say more technical operation like share buyback. There's something new also here you can introduce. So I already gave you that kind of possibility to deal with that kind of topic. So if I try, to say a few words on your proposals, there is a topic I think very difficult to deal with. We need to get the data, and it is at the same time a topic on regulation, which is a topic on cryptocurrencies. So it's very popular today. Everybody knows we have the relation of the prices on different media. And there's a discussion, of course, today. For example, does central banks can issue, use, develop in the economy, cryptocurrencies? Why? How? What are the pros? What are the cons? Do cryptocurrencies could be managed by private interests? Private insurer, or do they have to be nationalized and centralized into a central bank or a special organization which has a monopoly in each country or at the international level? We don't know. So we have many questions there, and but you can also deal with data in order to understand how the prices of cryptocurrencies are moving, and they are very volatile, as we know. A second good topic, which is also difficult, I think, to deal with, but it's very promising, is on bond, but not on classical bonds. We have already written many papers on bonds, and we had several very good phases in the past on bonds in Vietnam. But the topic here is on unlisted, not listed, unlisted bonds, and the development and on the market for unlisted bonds. Which is in contradiction, but it means even unlisted bonds on the official markets need some kind of liquidity. So it's a problem we find everywhere. We have good experiences in many countries. If a question is raised in Vietnam, you can use international experience, international papers, and bring something new on that kind of topic. It's a kind of emerging topic, but it is a good topic. It's not an easy topic, and there's experience, literature on that. Another up-to-date and very good topic, and it is presented here only for international tourism, but I think it can be extended to the global economy in the country. which is cashless payment. What about cashless payments? Do we need cash at the end? That's the question raised now in many countries and studied by central banks. Cash management is costly. It's not completely safe. Some risk behind, and central banks are thinking that in the next future, they can arrange a new system of payment without cash. So you have to study pros and cons to compare the situation of Vietnam to some other countries to understand what are the costs and the risks, how could be managed the transition period. Cryptocurrencies, unlisted bond market, cashless payments are, I would say, up to date, good topic for the future. And if you are able to write a good CP, good thesis, it is one, they are among, the best opportunity you can find. We have also, I think, two different proposals, on digital banking. So it's probably with some parts in common with the other topic on retail banks and customer satisfaction. More technical, probably. Yeah, have a good presentation, and I really think also that it is a topic which is needed. Yeah, probably easier than the last three we said were done: cryptocurrency and listed market, and cashless payment. But there is room for that. What about digital banking? Do all the banks will develop digital banking, or some of them will stay with the classical, historical, I would say, management system? What are the investments? How to find the right persons? What about the customers? What does it mean in terms of branches? What does it mean in terms of even financial structure of the bank? And have very, very good integration on that. So it's quite easy to do that with a few cases and a few interviews. But there is really room for that, and it is up to date and it is moving. Sometime in this program we find also topics on real estate. And in the proposals here, we have two proposals on real estate. Real estate is becoming more and more, not only a kind of project development topic, rare, which is one way to deal with that, but it is also a topic on the development of new categories of assets. So the problem of measure, the problem of liquidity is here behind, and there's room also for a topic on real estate liquidity, real estate as an asset, real estate in the portfolio of the asset. There's something to do. So I read these proposals and I think, divided where they are quite of interest. And as always here, we find, and I don't have that on the list here, you find on the screen. We don't have that, but here it is introduced by two different students of the group, The first one is an analysis of a time series on stock market. It's, I would say, methodologies cannot be very original. It's already well known. We have many, many papers. That's very often done, by statisticians or mathematicians coming to finance or banking. Generally, they don't have good experience of finance, corporate finance, or banking operations, but they are good, in terms of noise behind. Could you eliminate this Trung This is trying to improve the situation here. So we have something of interest. Okay. But it is a math, it is a stat. Please eliminate the non-cities. Thank you. It is a math topic. It is really a math topic. On the other side, you get volatility. I already said a few words on that. You get a volatility topic. We had in Tech 17 study a volatility topic with several models. It comes back very often, and volatility can be measured on different kinds of assets, Anyway, if you apply volatility models on new categories of assets, I think it is the case here. There is an opportunity to make also a contribution. So when I have a look to all of these topics, I would say we have classical ones. And in that case here, one of the screens will be 2 slides, and you still have. We have a topic on IPO, for example, topic on retail bank and customer satisfaction. Very classical, there's something to do, but your contribution will be limited. You have a topics you have to be careful to because they are too large, too descriptive, you have got problem data, and some experts or research teams, economists are working on, and this is the case for frozen food here, for the dairy product topic, and for the topic on international trade. After that, depending, on the intakes, you find several kind of topics which are up to date. They are not up to date 2 years later. And here, that's clearly first the topics on M&A. And the strength of this topic is that very new in terms of application, because we have the M&A operation in the education system. I don't know if you want to find the value of CAVG and to try to send CAVG to someone else, or you want to buy another institution in Vietnam or abroad. But that's quite interesting and quite difficult. You have an M&A, in e-commerce, which is of course up to date, particularly in after 2 years of pandemic, and you get a topic which is quite different in M&A, which is synergies, which is a problem of a question of measures, but which is very, very important because we know that synergies are part of the price, part of the negotiations, and have to be identified before, generally, as a potential buyer, as a bidder, you know what you will really find in the firms you plan to buy. This is what we have to do. And we have the portfolio of up-to-date topic here. Some of them are more difficult than some others, but for different reasons we bring something. And remember that we have first these 3 topics, some very specific, cryptocurrencies, unlisted bond market, and cashless payments. Okay. We have also up-to-date topic, 2 topics on real estate. So it is real estate liquidity, real estate as an asset in a portfolio, and this is really up to date and important. Real estate investment is important in Vietnam, and as it is in many other countries today. And we find 2 topics which are the limits of technical and up to the topic digital banking and time series analysis for stock market investments. So that's what we have. So what should I say on that? I would first say thank you very much. You have found good ideas, you know, and we need that program to modernize, you know, the kind of topic which are chosen by the students. It's part of the image of the program. It's part also of what we can teach and demonstrate in the future in more specific courses I will introduce. The second point is that for you, you know, to get a kind of experience, I would say, or knowledge in a new topic, up-to-date topic, could be very useful for you in your careers to become some kind of expert, or at least to have a good knowledge in new topics which are important for your bank, for your company. It is good investment. It's very good investment. I would say third that it allows debate between you and professors, and even if it's discussion quite difficult today because of the situation, like we're teaching online, you know? But it is one issue which is central, to have discussion, research projects between the group of students in takes and the professors, and we have several topics here which are in line with this goal. So this was my first very first point, I would say, this morning. Now, before going further with the slides, you know, how to organize this. You know. We are today in the third part of January 2022. We're of course a bit late, you know, but we are moving to the end of the program, and we have several steps in front of us. The first one, you know, first step, I will send you two different elements by email. The first one is a summary of ideas on how to deal with your project. I mean, reading that the paper you sent me, I discovered some good, very good ideas, some more risky ideas, and I will try to summarize all these points in about one page. It's very short, but in order you understand what I want, what are the warnings. Second element, I will answer you on an individual basis with an email. It will take a few days on your proposal, in order to give you some advice, suggestions, comments, references, warnings. One of the problems, and we'll go into that point in a few minutes, is to be clear on the perimeter. What is inside the topic? What is outside? It means the topic you have to find the right dimension. Very often it has to be reduced. It is too large, because students always do that everywhere in the world. You know, they think they can write a book in 3 months. You know? But at the same time, you have to keep enough space in order to be able to find data, to find cases, and have a good contribution. So you will receive also an individual paper, individual email on your proposal. This is another topic. I always say my conclusion will be either I validate or I don't validate, but I validate if you do such or such modifications. And of course, you can go further on if your topic is validated. So this is a very important step. So this will take, because I have only 22 of your proposals. So I think some of them are coming, probably in the days or weeks to come. As we are January 22nd today, I think this process will not be completely over before the middle of February. I hope it will be over by the middle of February, but I don't expect first to go quicker for me, but also to have these proposals available, all the proposals available before February 15th. After that, you will have to start with the problem of writing, okay? And it will take you weeks, months, okay? And if it is possible, but it means at least some of you are ready, I will keep, a defense session in June, probably by the end of June, or the first week of July. This is the usual schedule. I know that it is tight for you because we started late, and we are very late compared to the intakes before the beginning of the pandemic. But probably perhaps 3-4 students will be ready in June. If you are, it is much better for you, it is much better for me. We have to move. For most of you, the probabilities that the defense will take place later after the summer, and we will schedule another defense session probably by the end of September or the first week of October. And I'm waiting for about 20 students at least presenting their paper, their thesis, and defending the thesis at that time. So that seems to be the normal schedule. Because the pandemic is not over, because life is quite difficult, still difficult at the moment, and of course you are working at the same time. So all of this process, it means between now and February 15, you can improve your paper. Send me a new version of the paper if you think it can be improved, and I will answer you. Right. Individually send you a global paper, short paper with my recommendation to all the members of the group. And after that, you can send me regularly your improvements, drafts, questions, and I would say in general, in average for the last intake, we had 3 different exchanges with the students. Professor Chan, Yen Chan will do that with me also. And if we need an outside expert, we use also an outside expert, of course, depending on the technical dimension or very specific dimension of your topic. But generally, what we bring, it's more methodology than technical references. You find them by yourself. So this is the process. So try to integrate this preparation into your own schedule. Don't wait to start with. Even if you have limited time, start right now. This is really my advice. So that was for the second element, the topics, enzymes, the schedule. Now, let's come back on the topic with these slides, which are still very up to date. So the first point here is about the difficulty. some topics are sometimes up to date, of interest. You think that it is a good investment, but be very careful. You have a limited number of months available, limited time also, and if cases are difficult to find, data are difficult to collect, you could be in a very difficult situation. So when you start with a topic, with your research questions, check first if you will find the data you need. Either quantitative data or data issued from interviews from experts or case study you really need in order to have some practical dimension. So the feasibility of a topic is the first question you have to go through. I take an example here. When you want to go through cryptocurrencies analysis, what do you want to do? If you want to have something on regulation, of course, you find paper outside Vietnam, but you need some elements on the Vietnamese situation and policy on cryptocurrencies. It means you need some interviews, okay? Probably an interview from an expert, technical expert, an interview from a commercial banker, an interview from someone from the central bank. Can you get in the next few months this interview? Or if you want to do something which is mainly based on data, I mean to simplify prices, volumes, when you get these data, if you get the data after that, it's more an econometric problem than anything else. It's much easier to solve if you have good knowledge of the start and the econometric models to run. But really, you have to do that. A third example, is on cashless payment. Cashless payments means technological dimension. And this technical dimension, you have a possibility, to make interview, find good papers. Where are we in the more advanced countries? What about the situation in Vietnam for cashless payments? What about fintechs in that field? So if you are able to collect that kind of information, to get the interviews, to get the cases, don't hesitate. New topics are probably this one up to the topic, but you have to check the feasibility of a topic. The second point here is that we need to understand clearly what are the limits of a topic. The problem, many students don't understand this very well. They think they can't deal with cashless payments in general. It's probably very difficult because it's a very large topic, and you have to be very careful and to say, okay, what could be the reduction dimensions, how to limit the perimeter, what is inside, what is outside. Can you deal only with Vietnam? Do you deal with Vietnam with a comparison with a few countries? Which one? Why? Do you deal with cashless payments in general in Vietnam, or cashless payments in certain circumstances with an application to the bank strategy, for example, or to consequences for the CFO and financial team in an industrial company? What are the limits here? What are the limits in terms of technology? Also, do you use you study one or two different technologies, because we have several technologies on that? Do you also plan to study the fintech contribution and the relation on that point, on that topic between the banks, the insurance companies, the non-financial companies also, and the fintechs. Are they only providers of technology? Are they integrating joint ventures with partners? Are they bought sometime by the banks or by the insurance companies? This cashless, this cash payment fintech specialized in payments, modernization of payments, put in mind that way. So be very careful to have a clear perimeter. Third, you should escape to a descriptive paper. In a thesis, in a CP, you have to raise questions. You have to raise questions. And in the introduction, I already said a few words on that, but I'll repeat that. I think it's very useful. You have to identify the questions you want to bring at least some elements of answers. You are not writing a PhD thesis. This is not the problem. You don't have time. It's 3 years to write a PhD thesis. You are not a researcher in a research team, even in a large bank or in an international institution. You don't have 3 years in front of you, okay? So you have to be very, very careful. But anyway, you should be with a paper integrating questions, and you have to try to find some elements of answer to this question. It's not a descriptive paper. It should be more analytical and empirical than descriptive. So this is very, very central to understand. And this is very often the difference with the papers we have written before, which are mainly descriptive. This is another kind of paper. You have to raise questions. You need data. Data can be qualitative, can be quantitative data, but you need some kind of data. Be careful also, and I have 2 or 3 examples, among the 22 here. Case studies are interesting. Application to your own business is also of interest. But you are not a consultant, even if it's a consulting project, it means you are not supposed to bring only a practical problem you find in your firm and you try to solve this problem. This could be a part of your thesis, It means if you identify a problem in your firm, you start, designing a larger framework, and among the methodologies used, you will find the case study or several case studies, your case study being the larger one or central case study. And at the end, you have recommendation, but it could be recommendation in general on the topic and more specific recommendation to your firm. But it cannot be only one project presentation, analysis, and development. And be very careful to that kind of situation. Okay. It's sometimes difficult when you have something which is quite new. We had with last intake 2 students working on infrastructure. And of course, a number of cases you can find at the same time one category of infrastructure, like motorways, for example, with BOT, PPP is very limited in the country. So it's a specific case, infrastructure, but you have to take into account this situation. you deal with a topic, you don't deal with a case. A case is one of the methodology which can be used to go through the developments, collect data, examples, behaviors, decision-making processes, evaluation, whatever you want. But this is not the central part of the thesis. In many cases, particularly on these new topic like cryptocurrencies or cashless payments, or even on IPO, for example, for a classical one, you will probably present some kind of interviews. It's probably also the case on this topic with on retail bank and customer satisfaction. And my warning here is that interview is not a kind of discussion you are in the corridor with drinking a coffee, it's something which is organized, which is structured. Organized and structured means that you should have either what we call an interview guide, okay? But what you can do, for the topic on retail banking, customer satisfaction, you get a list of 8 to 10 questions, and you make interview a customer when they are in a branch, or after meeting someone in a branch, and you collect the information, okay? And it's easy to have, I would say, a large number of interviews on 8 to 10 questions in a specific place with customers of the bank. It's generally easy, very easy. Many students do that. Now, if you want interviews for cryptocurrencies, for example, development policies, you need to find experts. You will not find 20 experts. If you get 2, 3, it would be a very good, result. And you will try to obtain detailed information from them on strategies, on technologies, on state of development, on behavior of different players. And you would need a very detailed questionnaire with different categories of questions, some of them being closed questions, some others being open questions, so that's a different kind of interview. In many phases, you find at the same time an interview guide and a questionnaire, because different persons are interviewed to try to bring different kind of data, to collect different kind of data. But it is never something which is unstructured. It has to be structured, prepared before. And when you do that, you have generally find several steps. The first one is a preparation of the questionnaire, or preparation of the interview guide. And of course, you have to start with somewhere with first draft, and which is a pilot study. And this first draft has to be used on one or two persons in order to improve a draft. There is not to collect information, it's to improve a draft and have at the end of this pilot step, enough experience on the quality or the answers to your questions, and to improve the questionnaire, to improve interview guide, and then to start, with the second step, which is made of the interview themselves. And the third one, of course, is the analysis of the data collected, what to do with that, you know. And I already said that before. You have at least to use this material in the core of your thesis, but also for each interview to present a short summary of the interview. And generally, most of them, it's appendix, exhibit number 3. Remember that number 1 is a list of the figures, the tables, and the graph. Number 2 is the list of the abbreviations, and number 3 is dedicated to the interview with the presentation of the interview guide, a presentation of the questionnaire, and a short summary, no more than 10 lines of each interview. Shorter, of course, for short interview, longer for long interview. So this is very central, and this is not ever understood by everyone. So be very careful. The point 5 here is on case study, you know, and this is very similar, in fact, to point 3. It means if your methodology is based mainly on case studies, you know, one case study is not enough. You need several case studies. Perhaps you can have one main case study, is more important than the others. This is something correct. But that means the central or principal case will be split into several parts, and that for each part, for example, you compare to another situation, another case, which is also of interest and very often different from what you find in your central case, and you will underline the differences and try to explain the differences. Okay, so case study is not enough. You can also use case studies coming from the literature. It means you have been through your references, and in some articles or books, you have found good case studies. Okay, they are not yours. They are not, as we say, primary data, but secondary data. You can use them. The only, but it is important condition is that restriction is that you say where you find it, who wrote this case study, and this is very often, let's give you a possibility to use frying cases. You have central case in a bank or insurance company or non-financial company in Vietnam, and perhaps you find 1 or 2 other cases in Vietnam, but you have 3, 4 coming from the literature, and you can make comparison of all these cases. But you have a primary data and you have a secondary data. That's very usual in that kind of project. So anyway, that means a case study is not enough. You need several ones. It can be organized around the central case study, which is case study you know very well. You can use other case studies coming from Vietnam, but they can be either global, I would say, case study in parallel with yours, or they can be more examples than cases which are used to compare several elements in your central case, but you cannot make comparison with cases coming from abroad, coming from literature. And this is generally very useful in order to get good practice and warnings. Be also very careful. I think this is improving every year, but very often in the first draft, I find either 100% of Vietnamese references or a too large percentage of Vietnamese references. You know, generally, the kind of topic we have in the MEBF, which are of course finance-oriented, they are not specific to Vietnam. You can find, of course, the timing dimension of the behavior of the players, the regulation, the level of development of that topic in Vietnam. But anyway, they are in general topics which have been studied abroad in different kind of countries, developed or emerging countries, and you find generally the best references outside Vietnam in literature, in articles, in books, in reports written by authors coming from different countries around the world. So open the windows and use a good practice, use the literature coming from abroad. Today, about 80% of the good literature is written in English, and we have internet and we have databases and so on. So it's quite easy to find that, to find these references. You can. One of my recommendations here at that stage, have a look to past topics, and what our program assistant get lists of the past topics of the thesis from intake 17, 16, 15, 14, and so on. Have a look to the topics of the past intake students, 3 or 4. I didn't go back to number 5. What was completely different. But, let's say 4, for example, last intakes, and have a look to the topics. And if you think, if it is of interest for you, ask for the thesis. And the most interesting point at the beginning for you is first the list of references. It's accelerate the process of collecting the references for you. Use also the presentation of the reference, the research questions and methodologies. After that, specific to each paper. But these 2 points, references, reference lists, and second, the research questions and methodologies could be very useful and give you new ideas, accelerate the process of the design of your topic, on the topic, research question and methodology, and save time, because you are, of course, always short of time. Let's have a look to some of the characteristics in terms of suggestions here. Be very careful to a few points, on the selection of a topic, but I said a few words also already on that. Be very careful to this topic, which are up to date, but moving very quickly. That's the case with these topics on the pandemic, for example. We hope that pandemic is nearly over, but we are not sure of that. And you start now with a topic, and in 5 or 6 months from now, perhaps the pandemic will be completely over and would not be a topic anymore, or we will have a new wave and very different circumstances for the firms in the banking and the financial system. So be careful to these topics which are moving very quickly. We are still in the process of the crisis. It's difficult, to use as a topic for for our thesis. Okay. It is clear also that if you choose topics like that, you will have a lot of references. If references are late, good articles are published 18 months, 2 years, 3 years after the circumstances. So you will be, as when you write for a daily newspaper, not on kind of research project. Second point here is you should be very careful on the title, subtitle. Words are important. Words are very important. Okay. So I found some good titles here, but anyway, title can be very often improved when it is already acceptable. And don't hesitate to use subtitles also, because of subtitles give to the reader the limits, the perimeter very often, if you study, for example, cashless payments, it could be can be cashless payments in the commercial banks. The case of Vietnam, subtitle, the case of Vietnam in 2022. Or if you go to a very classical topic like IPOs, you can have something like IPOs in the banking sector, specificities of the Vietnamese operation compared to other emerging countries. So be very careful to the words, use the subtitle, remember that you are dealing with a general topic, the general topic is reduced on several parts, period of time, that is very often economic sector, geographical dimension also. 3, define clearly the methodology you use and explain your choices. You can do, and this is true for all the elements you introduce, present in your thesis. You can do whatever you want. You are free. A thesis is your paper. It is your production. It is your contribution to the knowledge and to experience and to recommendations to firms, banks, regulators, and so on. It should express your point of view, but using some kind of, I would say, scientific basis. So you need a methodology. So we already went through that point, and the question we have always is: do you use qualitative methodologies? And in the kind of topic you have chosen, that kind of methodologies are mainly case studies. Case studies could be large, big case studies, can be more example than really what we call case studies, both, and can be also interview. You can use both. You can have a case study with some examples to make comparisons coming either from your experience, coming from interview in Vietnam, and or coming from the literature, what we call this secondary level of collecting information, but also, for qualitative, it is always examples and case studies. And for interview, it can be conducted through interview guide and or questionnaire. All these methodologies are compatible. I mean, you don't have to choose between them. This is not really an issue. I mean, you don't have to choose between making cases, presenting cases, and developing interviews. Perhaps we do that at the end because you can develop interviews one with another, and you will concentrate on case studies. But there's no specific reason for that. And generally, this is point 4 here. Mixed methodologies are better because interviews allow, for example, to validate the information you find with case studies, allow to go further into the details after studying the case. You get an interview to interview for interview, can go for questions which were not very clear in the case study. So mixed methodologies are recommended. But it's not only mixed methodologies in the qualitative side, but you have to integrate also the quantitative dimension. To integrate the quantitative dimension, you can have, and this is really recommended, generally the best papers, integrate different methodologies, qualitative and quantitative. And quantitative could be simply regressions, correlations, basic methods. As you know, I have been through in different courses, and particularly in the first quantitative course with Professor John. But it could be also, for example, for M&A, 3 topics here on M&A. It could be even studies, which are quite easy. We have software for that, they're available everywhere right now, and they can be used at the same time with a case study or with interview. So the conclusion here is that you need a clear methodology. You should explain your choice, why you choose to do that, then not something else. And it is clear that even for quality of the data collected, for quality and validation of the results, it's much better to use at the same time in phases several methodologies. They could be qualitative, but they could be qualitative and quantitative. And John will best paper introduce, develop different methodologies. This is a mistake which is very classical, and students have to choose a methodology, and students compare different methodologies and say, and not very clear, MCT is number 1 and number 2, which is the best one. And generally, it's not the right way to deal with the problem. Is to develop 1 and 2 at the same time. I already explained that, but I want you to understand this also about interviews. This is the point 6 we have here, and the point 7. Okay. You have different categories of interview. I hope I was clear enough on that. That means first you can have what we call pilot interviews. You want to make interviews to be sure of the quality of your questionnaire or of your interview guide. You have been working on a draft from several days, and you went through different interview guide and questionnaire. You find the literature. You have to try to apply it to your topic. You try to be original, to raise question in order to get all the data you need. And now you have a first test, in fact. So it's a pilot step. So you take your interview guide, you take your questionnaire, and you try to find 1-2 persons in order to make a first test. You use a questionnaire, you use interview guide, and first you want to know if the person who interview understands the questions. Sometimes it's very clear for you because you have been in the topics for several weeks, and the words are very clear. And for someone else, even an expert, it's not always very clear. So you have to adapt your vocabulary. And you understand very quickly also what are some questions you cannot give you a very precise answer, but it's more a balanced answer. So we need an open question, not a closed question. You have to move your questions. So that's also very useful. And you understand at the end of the interview that this expert or this person which is interviewed has something else to say, and which is not taken into account into the questions. So it's in the pilot test, it's always very useful to have a final conversation, discussion, in order to try to catch and collect, the elements you didn't integrate in your first draft. So then you modify your draft. Pilot tests are very, very important. Then second, you use your questionnaire, and you use your interview guide, with the persons you want to interview. Okay, that's very, very, very classical. You collect information. And step 3, you have all this data, all this information. It can be partly qualitative, partly quantitative. You have to analyze it. It's data analysis, as we say. Sometimes it's comparison of arguments. It's a kind of semantic analysis also, but it can be a very quantitative, basic statistics, frequencies, means, variance, median, but it can be also more complex, like event studies, for example, as we said for M&A. So that's your data analysis, okay? And you write your results, your conclusion, and in many cases, point 4, 1 is pilot study, 2 is questionnaire and interview with the people you interview, 3 is data analysis, 4, you write your result, conclusion, and recommendations. In many cases, you have recommendations, not for all the topics, but for some of them at least, you have recommendations to CFO, CEO, or CEO of a bank, or sometimes to the regulator, or sometimes to the investors, sometimes to the central bank. You write all that. And last, you have a last step. Don't forget your last step. Pilot study, interview, okay, data analysis, okay. You write the results and recommendation. And then the last step of your process is what we call the validation. Remember, I already presented that. So validation, you have always three ways to validate. The first one is your understanding of the situation. You try to think about the results you obtained and if they are in line with what you thought before making the study. And you have to explain the differences between your opinion before and the, let's say, scientific result you find right now. Second point, the validation, is to compare your own results and recommendations to the to what you find in your literature review. Are your results similar, different, identical to what you find in the different articles, different references? And you are mainly interested by the differences, because very often the differences are due to the category of firms, banks, markets you use, period of time. You are working in a specific economic sector, which is not the sector used in the literature. So you bring some kind of new contribution with the application to a specific sector, specific period of time, and so on. So that's quite interesting. And the last step for validation, it's with all this experience, pilot studies, interviews, data analysis, results, recommendation, and the first two steps of validation is to go back to someone who knows very well the topic, practitioner in general, and to explain what you did and what you found, and to discuss about these results. I mean, one of the weaknesses of many studies, and particularly at that level on phases, is that students apply methodology and they say that's okay, I got the methodology, particularly when methodology is quantitative. And they say we have a model, it's good, we have an answer. Want to do some more? Want to go through validation discussion? But remember that there is no truth. What you find through interview, what you find through model, what you find in case studies, there are bias, might several hypotheses, either which are introduced by the model or which are introduced by the fact you use case study at a certain period of time, in a specific country with a specific example case studies coming in front of two economic sectors. So you have to be very careful to introduce this question about the quality, the bias, the characteristic of your results in your analysis. This is very, very important. Spend time on doing that, on the choice of methodology, on pilot studies, on questionnaires, on interview guides, data analysis, and validation. And validation. This is very often partly or entirely forgotten by students. We had a few presentations last Saturday, 1 week ago. It's not very far, and as usual, we find good topic, good limits, perimeter was clear, But after that, it was mainly an application of one methodology and no real discussion, no real comments, uh, no also real discussion on the application, practical application of these results. And part what we are asking for is that, of course, you have a good knowledge of literature after designing clear topic with a clear perimeter. You are able to go through application of a methodology, collection of data, a data analysis, but after that discussion, good practice, warnings, validation are very, very important dimension. Um, finance, banking, they are not a branch of math or stats. Math, stats are very useful tools, but they are tools. We are not waiting for a result for a quantitative model. We need that, but it is only part of the story. Be very careful to this point, and this is one of the drawbacks of weakness we find very often in that kind of phases. Remember what I said in the preceding sessions. I think this is very useful to come back from time to time on your title and subtitle, because things are moving. What you think now is not what you will think on these 2 points in 2 or 3 months. Or if you have find a good topic, the modifications will not be very substantial, but you can improve progressively your title and subtitle. And this is also one of the reasons to start very early. It means right now if you don't start. And to come back regularly on what you have written in the title, with the title, the subtitle, and in the introduction paragraphs. So this was another part of what I wanted to say today before moving to other elements. And really what I'm waiting from you, in the next steps will be to write all these elements clearly. I mean, titles, subtitles, the first paragraph of the introduction with the perimeters and limits mainly, also with interest of the topic and the motivation, but it was done in the preceding session, okay? Write also a paragraph on the problematic and research questions, and go back to what I did on that, and we present some elements again in a few minutes. Think to your methodology. Try to identify the methodology you will use. Remember that these will be the first 3 paragraphs of your introduction. We don't need a historical story on the topic in an introduction. This is not how you have to write a management or a financial paper. Remember what I said. First paragraph is a topic, title, subtitle, interest of the topic, motivation, perimeter, and limits of the topic. Second one, problematic, research questions. Okay. Third one, methodologies, qualitative, quantitative, which one, why, explain. So this is the very first step. You should remember that the thesis is not a kind of classical paper dissertation, as we say, when you write the introduction at the end. This is wrong. The second point in this first step is reference list, and you should be involved in reference lists. Yeah. Design, identification of best references. Mhm. And some of you already sent me a short paper with a list of references, and in most of the cases, but I'm going to send you my answer, my comments on that. These were quite good. Now they are limited at the moment, generate 2, 5, 6, 7 references, but they are on the line, they are on the way. You know? So all the other students, I recommend you do the same. And for those with a beginning of a list, I would say you have to go further. Try to move to larger identification. So this is really the first step you have to go through. And the first paper I'm waiting for you is that kind of paper with a good structure of introduction, the required structure, and then the first reference list presented according to what we call the internal standards, the international norms. And this is what is very useful. Okay. After that, you will have to go to steps, to step number 2, with the literature review. But you have on that slide number 5, and get the slide, just have a look very quickly before moving. You have a few advices, also a few suggestions. The first one is quite clear, I think. Second one, it's for presentation. And a few cases with students, last week, they were nearly lost 10 days before the defense in the references. And why? Just because, they put references without taking into account the what we call the international standards or the Harvard standards or norms. It's they made a list, but the list was with references with a title, but not the journal, or with the journal, not the volume, and so on. So do that at the beginning. It means right now. Have a list somewhere on your computer, which is progressively made according to all these international standards. If you don't know what it is, just go on internet and type international standards in the reference list presentation, or which is generally easier and better, use an academic journal in finance, strategy, in whatever you want, and have a look to the presentation of the article, the books, the reports, the websites. They are different. You have to integrate that right now. Another point, and I had a few good papers with students integrating that, use micro and macro analysis, macro and micro analysis. When example you study IPOs, because we have a topic on IPOs, what does it mean? It means it is a problem for a firm, an IPO, of course. What are the reasons behind? What does it bring to the firm? Is it only cash? Is it new shareholders? Is it value creation? Is it the possibility to get a price for selling more easily the shares of the company? So all these are generally considered as micro motivations. But you have also macro motivation. IPOs is an important topic for the Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of Finance wants the development of the stock market. They want to have a larger portfolio of shares available to the investors. They want progressively to attract other categories of potential investors, investment funds or individuals, or foreign investors also. So that means you have micro and macro consideration. On many topics, you have both of them. And I would say that in many papers, the macro considerations are forgotten, and they are also important. And that's like what you find here, and this has to be introduced, also in the perimeter, international comparisons. I will repeat that very often among the discussion we can have. International comparisons are important, particularly for example and case study in Vietnam, because Vietnam is still an emerging country, but growing very quickly. That means example, case studies, already known, written, developed in other emerging countries which are more advanced, or in even in developed countries, can be very useful as targets or as experience. They bring good practice, they bring warnings, they bring comparison of success of others. Upon 5 also, something students have difficulties to understand when they often have a problem for syntax students also. Set of criteria. What does it mean? It means you develop, case studies. For example, 3 case studies. Case studies can be of interest by themselves, but something which is more interesting, of course, is a comparison between the case studies. Comparison. But to compare case studies, you need to compare them on something, based on criteria. So you have to design a set of criteria, a list, if you prefer, of criteria, 5, 6, and you have to make a comparison, generally a table. You introduce measures on these criteria for each case, and then you trying to make a comparison. You explain the again similarities, differences, and try to comment and to get some kind of partial conclusion of these comparison of the measures, taking into account or applying these criteria. This is very, very important. Just one word again on quantitative methods. When I say quantitative students, I recommend to a student to use a quantitative approach. Very often the answer is regression. So I have nothing against regression, it's very good and simple, quite simple methodology. And generally, you know very well the regressions and how to use them and what kind of results you can obtain, and the weaknesses also of regression studies and the different kinds of regressions. Even if most of you generally use only linear regression, but you have other regression models. But don't forget that in quantitative approaches, we have many other models, depending, of course, on the kind of problem you use. Concentrate your quantitative analysis and choice of quantitative methods on regressions. This is here just a list of a few practical, a few practical recommendations. The first one is you have to, I would say, spend time on the first question around the structure of your introduction, the questions, and so on. Let's really say what is needed. Second one is write short introduction and conclusion at the beginning and end of chapters. Don't hesitate to have chapters and sub-chapters, to have short introduction at the beginning of each chapter, short conclusion with the 3-4 main points to remember at the end. Two reasons. The first one, it will be very, very useful for the reader. Always think that if you write verses, it will be read at least by the jury member at the end. Okay, and you have to satisfy them. But any kind of reader should be satisfied. So a clear structure, introduction, partial introductions, partial conclusions are very useful. Remember also that for you, it's very useful also because the presentation of your results, if you remember step 4 of your presentation, is made mainly of a summary, a reorganization, a restructuration of your partial conclusion. Another point is on recommendations. Very often students ask, do you have to present recommendations? It depends on your topic. If you are working on volatility of a stock market, in Vietnam, we can have recommendations, but they are generally very limited. On some other topic, like cryptocurrency management, you can have more recommendations to commercial banks, to individual investors, even to the central banks. So it depends very much on the topic. But you have to answer to this simple question: do with my topic, I need to present at the end after the results presentation, the validation step, to have to present recommendation, and to whom? Because perhaps recommendation can be different from different players. Don't forget your appendices, but I already said a few words this morning on that again. So I don't need anything else here. So these are very practical elements, and you find them also in Professor Chan's slides, you have a problem of the tables, figures, and graphs. All of them should have a title and a number. Be careful not to have phases made only of tables, graphs, and figures. It should be written with sentences, which doesn't mean you cannot integrate tables and figures. This is a problem of relative percentage. It means if you are very good, tables, figures, and graphs, but too many, in fact, but you want to keep them. That means you have to split all these tables into 2 categories, or to make a segmentation between 2 categories. The most important one should be in the core, the others should be in an appendix. Remember also that all your references which are in the core should be also in your reference lists and bibliography. But on the other way, you can have references, you can find references in your bibliography which are not used in the core. That means the bibliography should be a summary of or global presentation of all the references you use in the core, but you can add some more to give the reader a possibility to extend its knowledge and information. Point 3 is just a very practical elements, Some students use footnotes. It's always difficult to read for the reader. It's difficult to manage when you are the writer. my advice should be use something very simple, which we commented here in point 3. You have a reference, an article wrote by Dupont, the year, and after that, the reference, complete reference is in the reference list. Two other points here, point 4 and point 5. The general conclusion is not, again, a summary of the results. They are already in the core. The general conclusion is very simple, limited in terms of length, about 2 pages. And you have 2 parts. The first one is, in fact, the limits of your, not the limit of the topic, the limit of the topic is in the introduction. But you have a project at the beginning, and very often you have done 80% of the project, but not 100% because for several reasons. So you have first to explain what are the limits of your study compared to your initial project, what you have not done. But also, I would say what you have done was not in your project. But very often, you have found another case study. You didn't expect to have a case study on another economic sector, and you have one in of interest. So the okay, this is the first part. But the second part is the potential improvement. What will you do if you had more time? Which say you are in June 2022, you defend your thesis in a hurry. Good thesis, but it can be always improved. And the question of jury members is, well, what will you do if you had 3 more months? What would be your improvement, your action plan, in order to have a better version, a better final version than the one you have presented this morning or this afternoon? And the second point in the second part, it's not about future research. It is you have written and presented, defend this thesis. Now, for example, you are working again on cryptocurrencies, and you are very you like very much this topic, and you want to be involved in a research team somewhere in the central bank or in the university somewhere, or even in a commercial bank. And now you have 3 years to develop a project. What will be the main questions? Last point here. Don't forget to spend time on the abstracting keywords. I want just to say here that abstract is not a summary of introduction. An abstract is a summary of the 100% of the code. It means you have to say something on your topic, something on your research questions, something on your methodologies, and of course something on your results and recommendation if you have some recommendation, which is quite difficult to write, about 15 lines, integrating all this information is quite difficult. And below an abstract, there's always keywords. Last line here. So it's already said, in fact. So now you have to start with the first step on introduction and reference list, and then we'll come back on that and writing. You have to go for the literature review, which is one of the main and most difficult for students, which is step 2, before moving on step 3, which is made of the analytical chapters. And the analytical chapters and number three step, is the most important one. It is the most important one because that's where you develop your interviews, your models, your case studies, and so on. Before moving to step four, and remember that step four, but I already said that, result, validation, three ways, recommendation, and then the conclusion. The conclusion, I just came back on the conclusion dimension. Okay, so this is, we have been through several points here again on the topic, on what you should do right now, on the schedule. This is what I wanted to do before having a very short break, about 5 minutes. And we move after this short break to other dimensions. So thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I make comments, as you know, on this presentation called 68. Yeah. So we have a break and I will move to another presentation. So 5 minutes break, just the time to have a tea or coffee or whatever you want before coming back. Thank you. Ça, c'est le 7 qu'il me faut. Je peux faire ça. 10, 8. Ils sont bien accrochés aussi. Okay, so I think it's really time to start again, you know. After this presentation here, and then we start with another set of slides, but together we have a set of slides. I will use them briefly on some points, but anyway, I recommend you read the slides very carefully. Okay. So if you have it to S1, to the warnings, read them very carefully. I already went through all these elements, but it's a kind of summary which can be very useful for you. So you should be now on slide number 3, a few points on research questions. I hope you see my slides anyway. If you don't see my slide, just then there is a technical problem. A few more points and which will be very useful in the days to come for you. Number 2 here, and number 3, and number 4 and 5, which are on research questions. You remember that research question is part of your introduction. You have to go through very quickly these research questions. And they can be, this is point 2, they can be organized around or with what we call an envelope question. It means a very large question and you have sub-question below. It means your organization is one envelope question and sub-question, and you try in fact to answer, to bring elements of answer to the sub-question. Or the second way is to have 2 to 4 questions at the same level of importance, and generally which are structuring your chapters or the analytical part of part number 3. An advice here is research questions cannot introduce a descriptive part. For example, I come back to the IPO. If your first research question is what are the different categories of IPOs in Vietnam, it's not a research question, it's descriptive part of your of your thesis. It means you don't need a research question to do that. You can have, if you need to develop that kind of presentation, you can have a context environment chapter in step 2 with the literature review. So no descriptive answer or presentation issued from a research question. In that situation, if you need the descriptive part, you can have a context chapter, you can have a specific appendix, but no research question on that problem. A simple question should be easy to read. We find very often research question you don't understand. Okay, they should be simple to read. They should be understandable. Point 5, which is also important, research questions should be followed by hypothesis. If you want to do good research, if your thesis is really research oriented, you have a research question, you make an hypothesis, and after that, test the hypothesis. Okay. So it depends if your thesis is more oriented towards a consulting recommendation dimension, or if it is more kind of scientific thesis with hypothesis, you try to validate the hypothesis. In some proposals also, there is no research questions, and this is the case in some of your 22 proposals here. So this is what I will underline in my answer. No research questions. That means that major modifications of this proposal is needed. Here, what we find, is a few points on methodologies. I already went through from most of them. But anyway, you can follow that, read that again very carefully. It could be very useful for you in your presentations. Now, on slide number 5 here, you'll find point 2 on linear regression, that's just what I said before we break. Point 3 is also very useful. On some topics, you require scenarios, simulation approach. If you remember, we have done that in the valuation course and also in the M&A course. We have example cases with scenarios which are presented. We did that particularly on the Sanofi case, at the table at the end, with the sensitivity analysis on the long-term growth rate and on the discount rate. And we understood at the time that the potential price was very sensitive to these elements. So scenario simulation, on IPOs, for example, on M&A values, okay, on values in the cryptocurrency model can be very useful. Don't forget that you can have, of course, complex simulation, but you can have also quite simple scenarios and simulation you can do nearly by hand. Well, this with a very easy model to write. The other points you already made comments on. Don't forget that, and this is one of the weaknesses of some phases, with your preceding intake, that we have a large number of websites, platforms, which can be used to extend your references and to design, of course, your reference list. Okay, use them. Use them. Use also, but I said a few words this morning on that. Past theses written by students from the last intakes. Very often, they have done the same kind of approach, looking for references, and you can save time using their references. Because, when you get 10 good references, generally the best way is to go into these references and to use the references of these authors. This means references of references. But the main problem is to start. So you have really two different ways. Website platforms on the one hand, past publications, articles, theses you have identified, and both ways should be used. Just a few words here on the last point number 6. Spend time reading references. Okay. A few students in the last intakes, they're trying to make a reference list nearly at the end of the process of writing. This is not the right way. This has to be done in step number 1. You have to make a selection, it's presented here, of the good references compared to the others. And these references, you have to read them very carefully. So you use the past theses. You use material already collected on the one. Second one, you use the platform. You use the websites. You get references. You present them according to international law. On some topics, IPO, for example, again, relativity, you will get hundreds of references. So you cannot manage 100 references. As soon as you find a reference, put them in your references according to international law. But very quickly, you have 60, 70 references, 80, and you need to make a selection. And this is very important. It means you need to have distinction between two categories of references. The first one is, let's say, the good, important, which is what is written in 0.5. Yeah. And you have the others. Okay. And this selection is important because the 15 or 20 good references will be the one you will read carefully, in order to understand what the different studies authors are writing on your topic. You have to spend time there. This is a very profitable investment. Very profitable investment. And some students, are bypassing this investment. And generally after that, their paper is very, very descriptive. And this is very useful because this is the basis of what you have to do on the literature review. Because when you have made this investment, first you have a good knowledge of the literature, good knowledge what has been rated. It means you can go further, a bit further than what is required in a thesis. Okay. You generally find also in these references, good research questions, good methodologies you didn't think. You are allowed to improve your introduction paragraph on research question, integrating research questions coming from this investment in reading the good references. You collect also, you find good methodologies. You can improve the third paragraph of your introduction using these integrating these methodologies. So first, you have a good knowledge of what has been written. Second, you improve your introduction, to improve your research methodology, your research questions and your methodologies. You find also material. Remember what I said? I said, perhaps you will have 2 or 3 Vietnamese case studies in your economic sector, for non-financial companies, or in the banking sector, or in the insurance sector. But generally, a way to find, other cases is to use the literature, and that's where you will find foreign international cases, which will allow you to improve your comparison and also your set of criteria you will use to make the comparisons. So new material is collected through this process. Some cases you find databases. You are very lucky because you read an article and there's a link, and you use the link and you find the databases. You are allowed to use also the databases. You are allowed to use these international cases. The only condition is to say where they come from. Okay. You will also collect through these in this literature preparation the results of the authors, and the results should be used. Remember, I already explained that, to compare your own result in the validation process, step 4. Okay. So the question, the students, and they're right to raise this question, and that is, yeah, okay, you get 80 references, fine. Now you want to reduce, because you have no time to read all of them carefully, and you want to keep 15 or 18. How to do that? My answer is the following one. Start reading all the abstracts of the 80 references. And after reading the abstracts, only the abstracts, okay, you divide the 80 into 2 groups, a group of 18, perhaps 20, and another one 60 or 65. And the 18 to 20 is the group of references. Where you find the references, you will read in details. You can find articles, academic, professional articles, reports in this list. It doesn't matter, it depends on the topic. Okay? And after that, you do what I'm trying to explain. You have this good list, good references. You read that, you have the goals are to have a good knowledge of literature, is to identify new research questions and methodologies, is to get new material, case and databases, and to identify also the results of the authors in order to improve your validation process in step 4. Okay? So now you have to write the literature. And to write literature review is not very complicated. There's something wrong not to do. Warning there. The warning is don't summarize the articles. Don't summarize article 1 and then article 2 and then article 3. You have 20 references, you read them, and you identify the main ideas. Or generally, the main ideas on the topic are 4, 5, 6, perhaps 7, but no more. And what you do in your literature review is to present these ideas. Idea 1, we explain what is idea 1, who has written on that, what is the source, the reference, What are they? There are several ones. What do they bring? What's your contribution? Is it a good research question, a good methodology, material you can use, case studies, and your results, and the results of your efforts. So you do that for the first idea, the second idea, the third idea, the fifth idea. This is the literature. This is what I'm waiting from you. So in step 2, you have this process of selection. You have the process of writing the literature review, and not in all the phases, but in some of them, you need a chapter on the context. I come back to my example on IPO here. And I said, a research question should not be descriptive, but perhaps you need to explain to the writer characteristic of the IPO process in Vietnam, the historical evolution, the pros and cons, and the question which are raised. This will be a chapter you can call a context chapter. That means after the introduction, references, you have to write 2 chapters in step 2, the context chapter and the literature. The context chapter should be very practical, very professional, like a paper you will publish, in an economic journal, professional, Saigon, I don't remember the name. You have an economic paper there. You can write an article or an article for Financial Times or for the British Economist. And the other one, literature review, is academic writing, professional writing, context is professional, literature review is academic. That's what I wanted to say on these different points. Last slide here. So it's just, a summary of what I said just before the break. Validation is important. Different type of validation can be used. And then you can introduce recommendations depending of the topic. Okay. This is for these slides. We went through what we call slides 86 after slide 68. And now I would like to move to something completely different here in 88. Because you have to think to this step right now. You have the 2 first steps. No? The 2 first steps are introduction, reference list, reading, literature review, context. You will have later, but I already did that. The analytical chapter, step 3, results and validation and recommendation 4 and conclusion 4. Okay. But the end of the process is also to make an oral presentation. 50% of your grade is on the writing, 15% of your grade is on the oral presentation and the discussion with the jury members. Okay. So you have to think to both at the same time. Writing, presentation, thesis itself, and the defense. And the defense is made of 2 parts also. First one is a PowerPoint presentation, 20 to 25 minutes, and the second part is exchange of questions and answers with the members of the jury. The first point, is how do you organize the preparation? And you have 2 categories of students. First ones would say, okay, we're in January today, and we will defend in June or in September. don't bother us with that problem of our presentation. And the second category of students say, no, we are better to prepare both at the same time. It means already write a few drafts at least of slides when we write part of our thesis. And some students say it is very useful to write slides at the same time because we have to summarize, we have to better structure, we have to go to the main points and to reduce, marginal comments or examples. So you do whatever you want. Either you start with the written part right now, or you start at the same time designing drafts of future slides when you write. It is clearly generally better for the quality of a poor presentation to write slides progressively at the time you deal with what you think is an important part. But it depends how you are accustomed to prepare presentations. So anyway, remember that a defense is a 1 hour process. That means you have written your thesis, and this thesis has to be validated or not by the jury members. If it is not validated, you have comments asking for some modification, marginal or major modification, depending on the case. If it is validated, that means you are ready to defend. And what is defense? The defense is a 1 hour presentation or 1 hour experience, I would say, with a jury. The presentation itself is only the first part. We have 3 parts there. And it is your presentation. It is 20 to 25 minutes, no more. Okay. We had a few very good presentations last Saturday, but we have also, I would say, average presentation. A good presentation, it's a very good presentation, it's 17-19 out of 20. Average presentations, it's 10, 11, 12 sometimes. Hopefully that time we did not have to say, okay, no, this is not the right level, validated written part, but your whole presentation is not acceptable. So you have to improve your presentations and you come back during the next session. But anyway, you can have very different grades depending on the quality of the presentation, 20 to 25 minutes. So what does it mean, 20 to 25 minutes? You see that here on point 2. It means something like 15, 17 slides. Slides with material. It means if you have a first slide with the title and your name, we don't take that into account. If you have a slide saying part 1, we don't take that into account. Okay. We generally say, in an old presentation, the average time necessary to present a slide. This is not a norm. This is not a rule. This is just some kind of empirical results, And we know topics are very different, and the way to present of students is also very different. But in average, it's about 1 minute, 30 seconds, 90 seconds in average. But this is an average. Okay. So you have this oral presentation, 20, 25 minutes, about 5, 15, 16, 17 slides. And then you have a second part, which is a discussion with jury members. 20-25 minutes also. And of course, you have to think about that part. And two questions can be raised. And part of your presentation could be structured in order to prepare for the question raised. And you can also have an impact on the question raised with your oral presentation. Of course, if you are a good manager of the jury members, you have prepared the answers to the potential question to be raised by the jury members. And the last one is your evaluation and feedback. It means for the last 10 minutes in general, first we ask you to leave the jury member. They decide of your grades, write a few sentences with underlying the strengths and weaknesses of your written and your oral presentation. And there's a last meeting with a debriefing process. So that's a structure. So, it's not, in my understanding, it's not what you prepare at the last minute. You have to really to develop a communication policy if you want to be to have a good presentation. This is here what I suggest in terms of structure. You do whatever you want. This is completely free, of course. Okay, you do whatever you want, but this is my recommendation. In fact, 3 parts in the last line. Remember that jury members have read your thesis, and an oral presentation is not a summary of your written presentation. However, in the first part, you have to bring back or to summarize a few important points. In the second one, to present your results, that means the elements of answer to your research questions. A third part, which is probably the most important one, to present specific points. And the last slides, what you present are the limits of the study, the short and long-term perspective, what I explained before the break on your conclusion in the written part. So part 1, if you did carefully what I recommended on the introduction of the literature review, it is very easy to write. And you can write it at the same time you write your introduction and you finalize your reference list with the identification of these 18 to 20 good references you will read in detail. 4 slides. The first one is the topic, its interest, your motivation, limits, perimeters of a topic, which means it's a short summary with bullet points, no sentences, and you are preparing slides of the first paragraph of your introduction. The second one is research questions. Third one is methodology, which are paragraph 2, paragraph 3 of introduction. And the last one is something which is new, which is not presented as it is in your slide, in your written presentation, which is the answer to one very simple question: what are the 4 or 5 references which were the most useful, in your study? What does it mean? It means that among the 18 to 20, you find 4 or 5 which are more important than any other. So you have to put them on the slide and to explain that to the jury members. So that's part 1. Part 2 is also 4 to 5 slides. You have research question or an envelope question with second level research questions. Anyway, you have some contribution elements of answer to this research question, and you should present them in detail. This is what we are interested in. You have been working for months on the topic, you've been through all these steps, and we are looking for your results. Your results, your validation of your results, and your recommendations here. 4 or 5 slides. Part 3 is very different. Part 1 and part 2, even if you have some freedom, the structure is very clear. Your freedom is limited. You can do whatever you want, but your freedom is limited. Part 3, it's completely free. You choose specific parts. You have studied in your research, in your writing, your thesis. It could be an article, it could be a case study, it could be a concept, it could be a theory, it could be an interview. Points which are useful to bring more professional dimension, academic dimension in your topic. We could be also good basis for the jury member to raise questions. So choose a few points you know very well, and you can present and also after that argue in an exchange of question and answer. This is generally where we understand if the students have a good understanding of the different dimensions of a topic. It's not in part 1 and part 2, because in part 1 and part 2, even an average student, can do something quite good. Part 3, it's more difficult if you don't have a good knowledge, a good understanding of a topic, references, case studies, interviews, models, and so on. After that, you have a last slide. The last slide is very easy to write if you followed what I said. You wrote a 1.5 page conclusion. Just underline and present the main points with 2 or 3 bullet points for the limits of the study, 2 or 3 bullet points for the perspective, and that's it. No. So do whatever you want. Concentrate. My recommendation is concentrate early also on your oral presentation. Don't forget it is 50% of your final grade. And that generally the best students make the difference in part 3 here, and after that in the question and answer process. My slide here, just a few recommendations on the other preparation here. So begin as soon as possible. This is what I said. When you prepare our presentation, you can send me versions early, at least the first version, 10 or 15 days before the defense. But, a few students this year sent me first version earlier because, for example, they wrote a few slides on the different parts, and they wanted to know if it was in line with what I was waiting for. So you can do that also. You can do that. Spend time, point 4, on point 3, it's clear. Point 4, spend time on the design of the slide. Slides are not sentences. Slides are bullet points. Slides should be easy to read. You can add a table or a graph if you want, but we had an example even last Saturday with tables. We have 20 lines one side, 20 lines on the other side. It's impossible to read that in an oral presentation, during our presentation. We are interested in what do you obtain with that table? If you have 420, 20, if you have something like 400 data, what to do with that? What are the most important ones? What are the conclusions? We are not interested by the calculation. Yeah, calculation is in the written part. So concentrate on the main points. Yeah. 5, some of you are already trained in terms of oral communication. Some other students are not. So my recommendation is think to that problem. And anyway, in any case, repeat, prepare, and repeat your speech. It's when we are not accustomed to do that, it's very difficult to understand if we speak for 10 minutes or for 30 minutes. So repeat your speech, measure the time which is necessary. Don't try to accelerate, the speech. If you want to introduce more details, more tables, more explanation, make a selection of what you present. And remember that when you make an oral presentation, the speed is in English is about 110, 120 words a minute. Yeah, no more. And anyway, think you invest time on the quality of the speech. It's something which is very useful to you, independent from your topic, but very useful in your professional life, whatever happens later. Now, 6, just what I said on the focus, the third part of your presentation, and the preparation. Point 7, of the discussion with the jury members. So this is what I wanted to present to you today. Now, just come back on what you should do. First case, you didn't write even a proposal for a topic, you didn't send me any paper. I have more students in the room here than the number of paper I collected. I collected 22 papers, and it seems you are we are 31, that means probably we are 30, or if Lynn is still there, you are 29. So at least there's 7 or 8 of you in that room who didn't write any proposal. So please do that as quickly as possible. First point. Second point, for all of you who send me a proposal, I will send you back a written individual proposal. Leave me a few days, I would say, at least 2 weeks. For the others, I will try to send you answers as soon as I get your paper. I will send a version also to Professor Nguyen Chan, and we are we've been working together for years, know very well each other, and perhaps he will add some recommendation, and if you need to talk with them, be free to call him or to send him a message. As I said, I will send also a summary of my recommendations. I will take all these individual papers I send you to give you a kind of profile of the important points to modify or to take into account. I will make a summary. Then you will move to the next step, and the next step will be to go through step 1 and step 2. Okay. And what I think is that you need to be ready to finalize at least a version of step 1 and step 2, introduction, reference list, context, and literature review, And I would say we are by the middle of January, it will be ready by the end of March. And we will see what's happened later by the end of March. Probably what I will do is to offer a potential individual interview by Zoom, and we have individual interview with Professor Chan also at that time. So up to the end of March, your schedule is clear. Remember that after that we have second step, but we have time to go through and to explain that again for part 3 and part 4, step 3 and step 4. And then I will open the first session for defense by the end of June and the second one in September. This is the schedule we have. And my recommendation is really trying to start or to move to the following step as soon as possible. You will understand that even if you compare two situations, students spending at the end the same number of hours on the phases, but the one starting now in January with the end of the process by the June 15th, and the second one trying to concentrate doing full time from May the 1st to June the 15th. The final product will be better in the case of a student starting right now. Because when you write thesis, you prepare a thesis, you need to think about it without being in front of your computer. You need also to talk to different persons around you, and you need to get interviews. You don't do that, in a few days. This is, for obvious reasons, spread over time. So start as soon as possible. Anyway, if you find some difficulties, which always happen when you find difficulties, don't hesitate to send an email to Professor Chan or to me, or to ask for a call. We can have a call. Even from Europe, you have WhatsApp, I think. So we can do that, or to have a Zoom meeting. Send me a Zoom link and we'll connect with you. So that's very easy. Don't stay with something in the topic, a reference, part of a structure you don't understand. Feel free to interact. That's what I can say. Also, in some cases, you have constraints with the pandemic, family, and whatever it is. And I understand you will wait for a few more months. But my recommendation is really now. If you can do it as soon as possible. You had courses, and it was a very difficult period because of the pandemic for you, for me, and you have to conclude, and you need to get your degree. So we are here to interact with you, to bring what you need, but please don't leave this project, this thesis on the side of the road. Try to move as quickly as you can, taking into account your own professional, family constraints. That's what I wanted to say. If you have not chosen your topic yet, take into account what I said after reading the 22 proposals I already received, and escape to the difficult topic. Try, if it is possible for you, to find an up-to-date topic as described them in the first part of this presentation today. Last point, perhaps, the courses will be over, over right now, and you will receive your grades as soon as possible. We are also very late with that, because the pandemic has raised many problems. Now you should have your grades on the M&A course. I sent them a few days ago. I will send you FA1 grades, financial analysis exam very soon. I already graded all the assignments and send the assignments grade to Lynn and to Tram. And progressively in the weeks to come, you will see all the grades left, and I'll ask my colleagues to do the same for the last courses. So I believe that in 1 month, you will get all the grades on the courses which are over now, and progressively for the last exams. I've asked that in a few weeks they are graded. In order the future is clear for you, and you have only to concentrate on this thesis. So this is in fact what I wanted to say today. Okay, if you have questions or extension modifications of your paper already, you can send me these papers either directly or through your program assistant. Okay, and I will answer you as soon as possible. That's all I think for today. So if there's 1 or 2 questions, I can try to answer the question. I know that it is always difficult for that system. So it's not very well. It's good for, it's okay for example, defense of thesis. It's okay for having a meeting with 3 or 4 people, but it's quite difficult with a class which is split in 2 campuses. So anyway, there's 1 or 2 questions. I can try to answer the questions, and if not, thank you very much for this today's session. It was the last session of the methodology course, and we will meet later. And I hope in Vietnam. I don't know what will happen with the defense sessions in June and September. It's still not possible to organize them on site at the moment, but perhaps in a few months from now, the pandemic will be over, or at least less dangerous, it will be less risky. Regulations of flights and visa will be different, you know, and we can meet for this last part of the program in Vietnam. Remember that what we have said in the beginning of the pandemic, it means now 2 years ago, is that there will be a possibility to have a study trip for each student on the intakes students intakes where the study trip was postponed or cancelled, you know, which is 17 and 18. And we offer also, but probably explained by your program assistant, the system of credits to acquire, to obtain the credits who are dedicated to the study, taking more courses, just in order you can get your degree after the end of your defense of a thesis. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening. It is the evening for you now, and nice Sunday. And I hope to hear from you very soon.
Excuse me, bro. Can I have a question?
Yeah, you can try.
Yeah. If there is some difficulty during we prepare the topic we have submitted, could we have any chance to change the topic?
Yes, of course. Of course.
And
anyway,
how and when?
you will have a chance, but perhaps I will ask you to change the topic, or I will ask you. You have 3 cases. Huh? First one is clear validation with marginal improvements. The second one is major improvements. I say, okay, you can keep the topic, but it is too descriptive. You have to. There is a good topic on. It can be designed, but you have to put it more analytical or empirical dimension. And the one could be also to say, okay, be very careful. It's very risky. Data collection will take time. You have no time. Time is short. You can spend months on the collection and try to find another topic. So no, it's still open. So, but don't do it in 6 months.
Okay, sir.
I mean, I will react in the 2 weeks to come. After that, you have 2 weeks to move. But let's say in 1 month, it should be solved.
Yes, bro. Because we have some ambitions to do some very interesting topic, but maybe we did not really aware that there will be some difficulty about data and about some sensitive information that we could approach. So this is just a question that in case that we have to change.
Okay, so I will answer anyway. If it's more difficult to decide, we can have a discussion. You know, I think we have WhatsApp, and we can have a. I will ask Tram and Lynn to organize meetings on Zoom like this one. You know, we can have a 15-20 minute discussion on Zoom, and that's okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
okay.
bro.
So yes. don't hesitate to raise questions and to ask for discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Any other point? No one? Okay, so if there's no other comments or questions, have a nice evening, take care, and I hope to see you for the defense. Goodbye.
Thank you, bro. Goodbye.
Goodbye.